Namaste and welcome to the Divas That Care Network. I'm your host, Gia-Raquel Rose, owner of Airs Above Yoga, and you are listening to Above the Ground podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, our network is going into its 15th year and is listened to in over 30 countries. I would like to personally thank you for giving me the gift of your time. It is truly my honor to hold space with you. And today, as we move into the month of April, I'm going to use a little pun about April showers bringing May flowers. And as we're coming out of our kind of spring cleaning conversations, this month we're going to talk about filling our cup. And what does that mean? So what that means is, as we talked about, purging and releasing that which potentially no longer serves us. Now we're going to start to talk about in that purging process, what we hold on to, what we keep, what fills our cup, what does serve us, what brings us joy, pivot to the head nod to Marie Kondo and to what sparks joy for you, right? So along that same vein, as you start to go through cleaning out and moving things along, let's say you're literally cleaning out your closet, let's say you're literally cleaning out your energy, whatever it is that you happen to go through, you don't want to throw. I'm not sure I love the phrase, but the baby out with the bathwater comes to mind, right? So there are going to be things that are precious to you, whether it's to your energy, whether it's to your heart, but things that you keep, things that stay with you, things that you bring with you when you move, things that serve you and bring you joy and support you and your space and your progress and whatever that may be. And so, what are those things for you? And making sure that as we go through that spring cleaning process, as we are officially entering spring now and thinking about those April showers, and what what is it that you have that is going to nurture those flowers and help you bloom in the next upcoming season? And that's where we're going to focus. And for our yoga asana, as we move this kind of practice through our body and this idea of filling our own cup. Now, I will say that these may not be the poses that fill your cup, but for my cup, we're going to talk about our pelvis and our pelvic bowl, and we are going to talk about hip openers. So hip openers are they can be a lover hate, right? They can be a lover hate relationship, but for me, some of my two of my favorite poses that we are going to talk about, and especially when they are supported, like so potentially against a wall, are half moon pose and triangle. And these are standing hip openers. So there are so many. So remember, your hips move in all sorts of different directions, four technically, if we're thinking about it, right? And so because your hips are able to move relatively fluidly in multiple directions, hip openers are truly, generally speaking, any poses that create mobility in and around your hips. So Warrior One and Warrior Two are both hip openers, but they're opening your hips in very different ways. Warrior One, you are working on the fronts of the hips. You're working on your hip flexors. You're working on your hip stabilizers. Warrior Two, you're working in external rotation. You're working on your glutes. You're working on opening up in almost a diagonal sense on the pelvis. So you're thinking about these abilities and this sense of creating stability in the unstable or creating stability out of stasis. And when I say stasis, let's think about our Tadasana, our mountain pose. Your roots, right? So that is basically your true standing pose. So your feet are under your hips, your lower abdominals are engaged to support your pelvis, your kneecaps are lifted, your quads are engaged. You are using the four corners of the feet to create that energy flow from the earth up through your legs. Your shoulders are engaged and tracking down your back. You are energetically engaged and in motion in a position of stasis, in a stagnant position. And that's what yoga really is about. It's about firing all these muscles and holding these asanas, these postures. So you're not technically, in theory, moving, but your entire body is working in and of itself to support your structure in space. And so when we think about creating stability from what is unstable, or in this particular instance, let's talk about, because we're going to talk about triangle. We're going to focus a little bit more on what people may call traditional hip openers, in that we are taking the legs laterally from the center line. So we're talking about our warrior two, we're talking about our extended angle, we're talking about our triangle, our half moon. These are the standing postures that people will generally associate with hip opening, even though warrior ones and high lunges count as well, as do low lunges. But we're going to focus on, because otherwise you'd be here all day talking about every single standing yoga pose and how it can benefit your the cup, quote air quotes for those listening online, the cup of your body and or your pelvic bowl, right? So we're going to fill our cup, and in doing that, we're going to create a lot of stability and opening in our pelvis. And so to do that, that will create strength, it will cultivate balance, and it's going to help to free up the nooks and crannies from sitting all day, whether you exercise, if you're a runner. It's hip openers create a lot of space for people that have lower back issues, but you want to be careful about how you do it. So to that end, one of the things that a lot of, I think, instructors won't necessarily be able to get into in like a traditional class type setting is this idea of the level of the hips. And I encourage you, if you're listening to this on the podcast, to check it out on YouTube too, because I'm going to do some hand motions to the best of my ability to make sense of this. And I will also, of course, post a video of these poses so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But when we're talking about poses such as warrior two, extended angle, and even in theory, the setup for half moon, but not necessarily half moon itself, because then your hips are no longer in that position. But let's talk about warrior two and extended angle. In theory, your front and back leg, or these, you're going to be facing laterally. So we'll just say your left and right leg. Your legs are going to be in completely different positions, but your hips, you want to have level. So like, let's say you had a pencil taped just below your belly button. The pencil is going to stay parallel to the floor. Okay. Now that may be challenging at first, right? But the idea is to keep that kind of long and again, I don't love the word straight, but long and straight line between the bent front leg, because the legs in both warrior two and extended angle are essentially, they don't change. It's just the position of the torso that changes. But you want to be able to keep the legs strong and stable. And one of the best things, and this is where I might get some yoga instructor pushback, but an instructor shared it with me and it really helped my practice. And so I'm going to share it with you. When you're talking about external rotation in the hips, and that is with regard to a pose exactly like warrior two and extended angle, where the front leg is rotated externally. You are standing with a knee bent and the heel underneath. So you're reaching, your goal is to get that knee at a 90 degree, but you may be above that and elevated, and that's okay. You can modify, not a problem. But the idea is to have that long line between the front knee through the hips, and then the back leg is then extended out straight. And that back leg is slightly internally rotated. For people who have a deepened practice, generally it's the front heel to the back arch of the foot alignment, as opposed to a warrior one, which is traditionally speaking where your feet stay in line with your hips, because you are on a single track in a externally rotated pose. You're going to have that back arch to front heel alignment. If you have some tension in your hips, it can be a back heel to front heel alignment as well. It'll give you a little more room to maneuver if you have some tension. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is things to be mindful of are the interior of the standing leg, well, both of your knees, to be honest with you. But when you have a little bit of an internal rotation, and that's where I'm going to get the pushback in that extended back leg, there may be a little bit of a pull on the inside of that knee, and you want to make sure that you're not feeling anything outside of your comfort zone. Sensation is fine, pain is not. So that's where we kind of play. Now, that being said, when you think about a lot of times, and again, this is what teachers may not be able to really delve into in a true class, because it takes time to explain this. But when you're in a warrior two or an extended angle, your front leg is fully externally rotated. That means your glute is firing, your quad is firing, and you are opening up. The reason why hip openers tend to create lower back pain in certain people is because if you then take the same position with the back leg and you take the foot parallel to the mat, which is essentially another way to modify, it's going to keep both hips in external rotation. Now, if both hips are in external rotation as you are supporting, what happens is the femur heads roll in the sockets and they compress the pelvic bowl, which then does not allow the tailbone to be able to lengthen and creates compression in the lumbar vertebrae. Now, I've just said many, many things, and I'm getting very technical. I will do my best to again, create a video to describe this. But I had an instructor once share with me that if you internally rotate the back leg so that, again, if your knee can handle it, so that you have the toe pointed slightly forward instead of parallel to the back of the mat, the outside of the foot parallel to the back of the mat. Instead, you turn it slightly in. So now it's more at a 45-degree angle from the back of the mat. It internally rotates that back hip and it allows space in the pelvic bowl, which is now positioned diagonally as opposed to simultaneously externally rotated. Now it's one's in, one's out. That allows so much freedom for the tailbone to then release into the pelvic bowl. And where this comes into play and why I'm getting so specific into this is for my favorite pose, one of my favorite poses of all the poses, triangle. Now, here's where we drop into our hips. And the reason for that is exactly what I just explained. So hopefully I won't bore us to tears by going through it all over again. Your feet don't change in triangle. It's a general transition from warrior two to extended angle, from extended angle to triangle. However, when we talked about our knee, hip, other hip, pelvis, all being in a line in triangle, that line is now on a diagonal. Why is that? Because of the exact same conversation we just had about the tailbone and the internal and external rotation of the hips. With the external rotation of the front leg in triangle, which is very important because as you begin triangle pose, you begin to straighten the front leg to come out of that bend in the knee. The back hip will then begin to track upwards to allow the space for the front leg to straighten. So your hips are going to go, that pencil that's taped under your belly button, it's going to start to point on an angle as the back hip comes up and the front leg lengthens and extends to a straight leg. Always, again, be mindful of engaging your glute, engaging your quad, protecting the knee, keeping a little micro bend in the knee so as not to hyperextend, because triangle pose is definitely one that can hyperextend a knee. So be careful of that. Always a little bit of bend is better than, popping a hammy. We never want that. And so from that viewpoint, we get to see the back hip track upwards. And if that foot was parallel to the back edge of the mat, and if that foot didn't have that little bit of internal rotation, the compression of both hips in external rotation that would create could be potentially quite uncomfortable and could create compression in the lumbar spine. So what's wonderful about this nuance, and it is a nuance, and that's why I say it's hard for yoga teachers to really dive into the body mechanics of this when you're teaching a class. This is why private instruction is truly wonderful, because you can kind of get into the nooks and crannies. So once you set up for that, then you are engaged through your torso because you've set the pelvic bowl up so that the spine can then lengthen through the lower back, be supported, and the muscles in and around the spine, your obliques, your lats, all of the muscles up and through the chest it's a revolving pose. So as you open up through the chest and you really engage your entire trunk, your entire body is firing. All of the muscles around you are supporting your bones in space. It is a truly beautiful, transcendental experience if it's done properly. And I love to do this against a wall, but even when I say that, know that if you don't have that little bit of internal rotation, you try to crank two externally rotated hips against a wall, it's not going to feel transcendental at all. It's going to feel the opposite. It's going to feel miserable. So this nuance is actually quite, quite important. And I encourage you to potentially try it. If you have a practice and if you're following along what I'm saying and you know what I mean, then by all means give it a shot. Otherwise, please press pause and wait for me to post the video. And so that way you'll be able to kind of visualize it, and always feel free to, Google Trikonasana or triangle pose. But similarly, and one of the best ways that I can kind of help is to help you envision this is as you move into half moon. And so half moon pose is essentially coming back into the extended angle where the knee is bent and you are in the heel to arch or heel to heel alignment. And you kind of catch your balance, you engage your pelvic floor and you engage your core muscles, and you shift off of the back leg. You reach the hand that, if you're in extended angle, you can have a block in front of or to the outside of your knee and calf, and you can press into that block with a straight arm. And then your other arm, the upright arm of the revolving and opening chest, generally tracks straight so that there's a line, palm facing the ear, from the fingertips all the way down to the heel of that leg. So that's why it is an extended angle, and you kind of, it's very lovely posture when you're able to execute it sufficiently. As you transition into half moon, it's almost kind of a mix between, triangle and extended angle, because now you're beginning to pivot into a straight leg. As you bring the back leg off the ground, you're putting the hand that was on a block now down onto the floor. I encourage you to keep the block for this. And this is where the wall comes into play with triangle and with extended. With all of these poses, you can do it against a wall, but you will also know and see how much into play that internal and external rotation of the hips really allows for a freedom of the lower back to allow the poses to feel good, as opposed to crunchy, crampy, uncomfortable. And so once you get up onto the wall and you're floating and you're on one foot and you have your hand down, generally speaking, the foot is about a block's width away from the wall, and the block is almost up against the wall with enough room for your fingers to press onto it. And you want to hold the block directly under your shoulder. And so as you kind of put yourself into this position and you raise the back leg, you will then see that you are now externally rotated still through that standing front leg. Nothing has changed there other than it now happens to be straight. Straight-ish, right? With that little micro bend for protection. But now this back leg is up off the floor. And, it's a great way to if you try to crank it into external rotation, you try to turn the toes out, and it's going to feel awful, and it's not going to look very particularly, aesthetically pleasing. You will know that, oh, okay, my toes are pointed forward, and now my hip is actually just in neutral alignment, like I was back in mountain pose. If you turn it in a little bit, then you're able to get into some of those deeper, like the piriformis, like those deeper hip rotating muscles, and you can actually turn the toe. And I like to do this with my clients. You turn the toe in and you start to do gentle leg lifts to lift and strengthen and support the muscles around the hip. And when I say the hip, I mean where the femur head meets the hip socket. And how many people have hip replacements? How many people have arthritis? How many people have knee injuries that are truly coming from the hip, or God forbid, even their feet? So all of these muscles in and around our joints are so imperative to keep us strong, mobile, and active that I can't shout that from the rooftops enough. So when we talk about filling our cup or turning our cup into our pelvic bowl, these are the strengthening postures that I want you to keep at the forefront of your mind, because not only will they empower you for your balance, for your leg strength, for your lower back lengthening, for your for everything, for all the things, in all of the ways. These yoga asanas, these postures, warrior two, extended angle, triangle, half moon. As a female who has, relatively open hips, these are all externally rotated with one leg again, but these are external rotation, right? So this is lateral on your mat. These are lengthwise as opposed to linear, much like a sun salute. Your warrior ones, your chairs, your planks, your down dogs, right? Those are going to be front to back hip flexors, right? So as muscle, think, and again, many of these, it's not triangle all of these postures also open your psoas and your hip flexors. It's just the different focal point. They're going to also work into the glutes, whereas you'll get strength in the glutes from a warrior one, and you'll get strength in the glutes because you're externally rotating a bit. All of these postures are going to help to strengthen. It's just which nuance we're choosing to focus on. And as hip openers are generally associated with receptivity, the feminine, and, again, when I say feminine, we're talking about from the yogic idea of the masculine sun, right side of the body, and the feminine moon, left side of the body. And I'm actually doing that wrong with my hands. So I'm dyslexic. Flip that around if you're watching this. But so think of it that way. We're not talking about gender. We're not going to get into that. This is literally about the physical structure of women's hips generally tend to be more externally rotated due to the idea or the nature of childbirth. That is why we're kind of making that correlation with the cup and filling our cup and giving our hips some love. And in so doing, allowing our lower back to also experience some love and release. Our hips are very, very much directly linked to the health of our lower backs. The stability, the strength in our legs is directly linked to the safety and the mobility of our lower backs. And so the stronger we keep ourselves, the more limber, the more, if you don't move it, you lose it. That's basically when it all comes down to it, if you don't move it, you lose it. And if we're talking about, the idea of what fills your cup and what keeps you active, staying active, holding on to things, what serves us, what are we keeping? Our mobility, our self-love, our self-care. That is something that we are not throwing out with the bathwater. That is something that we are keeping as we transition from the purging, what we're losing, what we're getting rid of, what is no longer serving us, to what is. And one thing that will always serve you is your body and your relationship with it. And a lot of times we take it for granted. Look, how many times do you put on high heels? How many times do you kick yourself afterwards? How many times do you, and I'm not saying that you should beat yourself up every time you eat a French fry, but how many times do you eat too many and then maybe you regret it, or maybe you had, one too many cocktails last night. We put our bodies through so much. What if you are on your feet all day working, our bodies take a licking and they keep on ticking. And in order to help them do that, we need to treat them with love and kindness. And these particular hip opening postures are a great way to do that. I have said multiple times in the past, however long I've been talking about this, that there are different ways to open the hips because the hips move in so many different directions. And I'm going to leave us with, again, a love or hate pose. And this particular posture, is a definite hip opener, and it is our tried and true, our favorite, our one of our many favorites. Again, a love or hate is our pigeon. And I know it's not the first time that I've talked about pigeon, and it won't be the last time that I will talk about pigeon. And I will, yes, post a video for pigeon. Pigeon is a prone hip opener, and it is a deep hip opener. So I don't encourage this. This pose is not for everyone. If you have knee injuries, if you have hip injuries or hip replacements, look it up. I will post, but look it up. Don't practice it without a blanket, bolster, a block, pillow, something in and around you, near you. And this is one that we've talked about in the past that can bring up emotions. A lot of emotions are stored in our hips. And so because of that, keep that in mind that, we really want to, again, we talked about releasing, but for this, we're talking about an emotional release. It can come from that because, like I said, a lot can be stored in the hips. And while the standing hip opening poses create that sense of empowerment and strength and flexibility, but in a controlled fashion, pigeon pose is prone. It's supported. It's one of those ones we'll talk about. I know we talked about in our yin yoga conversation with Anne. And so when you talk about pigeon, prepare for an emotional release because you may very well experience one. So just little disclaimer, tiny asterisk. When you set yourself up for pigeon, you're going to come into your cat cow or tabletop stance. So your wrists are going to be stacked under your shoulders, your knees are going to be stacked under your hips, and you're going to be, again, in that linear symmetry of knees, wrists, shoulders, and hips. And then it's a one side. So you're going to, let's say, start with the right side, bring the right knee up towards that right wrist, externally rotate that hip so that the shin starts to work towards parallel to the front of the mat. It probably won't get there the first time, and I don't want it to. Never, ever force. You're then going to tuck the toes of the left leg, which will become the back leg under, and you're going to heel, you're going to walk that leg back. One of the most important things is to make sure that you can get the leg far enough back that you come down to rest in front of the kneecap on the quadricep, not directly on the kneecap. If you're directly on the kneecap, you will not be comfortable. It will be painful. Nobody wants that. Once your back leg is back and your front leg is forward, your right leg is forward, you're going to take potentially, you may be on the ground. Kudos to you if you are. If you're not, a block, a rolled up towel, a blanket, a folded blanket. And you're going to prop it under your pelvis and under that right hip. If you have a knee injury or a hip injury on that right side, be advised it may not be comfortable and it may be contraindicated for you. So right about when you get that back leg behind you, you'll know if this is not it, because with that external rotation in the shin and in that right hip, you're going to feel it very, very deeply through the glute, through the outside of that right hip. And that's where you want to bolster and block yourself so that you feel some sensation, never anything in the knee. You don't want to feel anything in the knee, and you want to make sure that your ankle is active as it moves towards, it's going to be on the left side, working towards the left wrist, not going to be there out of the gate, and please don't force it. Make sure it's active and you don't feel like the ankle's rolling or catching too much of the body weight. You want most of the weight to be on the hip, on the bolster, supported and relaxed. And then you're going to fold over your leg. And you're going to breathe, and you're going to let your forearms come around you, support your head. You're going to melt down into it, and you're going to relax into that sensation. That's when you may experience a release. Now, if you look up king pigeon, and you will see potentially someone with one leg back, grabbing their back foot, arms reached over their head. It can get very aggressive. We're just talking about the restorative version here. So if you do want to come to practice towards that with the support of the blocker bolster underneath you, as you come back up to remove yourself, you're going to walk your hands back towards that shin. You're going to press your weight onto that extended back knee in your hands. You're going to lift up through, and then that will switch the intensity from the right outer hip to the left front hip flexor. And you will start to feel a deep sensation there as well. So I encourage you to wait for my video, or if you have a practice, to practice pigeon supported. And again, if you want to get into more of the, I'll call them Instagram pigeon poses that are very beautiful to look at and very, very difficult to attain properly, then I encourage you to work privately with a professional who can help you get there comfortably and safely. And then you would just switch to the other side and bring for that transition. I will say you want to make sure that once you are upright and you have your hands walking back, you shift your weight onto the top of the back quadricep, and the hands start to press yourself back up to create the space to then internally rotate, come off that hip slowly, gently, and then start to slide that hip back behind you. As you switch, bring the right knee, what was front, now back under the hip, bringing the left knee up, externally rotated towards the left wrist with that left heel and ankle now moving in the direction of the right wrist. But again, it's not going to get there out of the gate. Setting yourself up similarly as I just mentioned. So again, these are, you can't have a conversation about hip openers and not talk about pigeon. And then of course there are many other hip openers that you can do on the floor: bound angle, reclined bound angle, restorative hip openers. And I may do a part 2 to touch on that, or incorporate them into the meditation episode, which is going to be coming up next. But I really wanted to talk about, the idea of creating stability, filling your own cup, really beginning to do things that bring you joy, to recognize the things that support you. And nothing supports you quite as strongly as your legs. So starting there, creating that, thinking of that idea of our pelvic bowl, our pelvis being the seat of our stability, the seat of our balance, the seat of our power and our strength, especially, again, I am a woman who identifies as such, creating, tapping into our creativity, tapping into our power, treating our lower body with kindness, love, and strength, and making sure that when we do go through our purges in life, that we recognize what is important, what we want to hold on to, what serves us, what supports us, what gives us strength, and what empowers us to move to our next chapter. And nothing will move you in any direction better than your own legs. So, to that end, I just want to say that I am so very grateful to each and every one of you for sharing your space with me. And so I ask that you please feel free to share this space with yours and with your loved ones. For more goodness, please follow me on all the socials at Above the Ground Podcast or visit my website, airsaboveyoga.com. And as always, check out my other amazing sisters and divas at divasthatcare.com. You can find us all on SoundCloud, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple, or anywhere else that you may feel guided. Again, my name is Gia-Raquel Rose, owner of Airs Above Yoga, and you are listening to Above the Ground podcast, where every day is a good one.